After waiting for a very long time, I'm finally starting on the project of my dreams. I've been wanting a barn on my property since we moved in over 5 years ago. And today is finally the day that the dirt work starts. This is around November of 2024, but this project started way back in July of 2024. The dirt work guy came, wound up digging up a whole bunch of the land to make for extra parking and a bigger driveway, along with leveling out the pad. He applied all kinds of layers of rock and basically packed it down with his little bobcat. This was such a cool process to watch, and it did take a couple of days, and we had a few times where it rained in between. But having the extra parking and seeing that pad put in place really let me know that this is actually happening. So the project sat for quite a while after the initial dirt work was done. And this is the load of wood that was delivered sometime around early February 2025. And to me, I didn't think that this was near enough wood to build this barn. The barn that we're actually building is a 30 by 30 with a 12-foot lean-to. It's going to have two single car garage doors, a walk-through door, and two windows underneath the lean-to. This is a pole barn style, so that's why you don't see an abundance amount of wood. We've got 6 by 6 poles that are going to be buried about 4 to 5 feet down into the ground. Those are going to be your main supports, and then there's 2 by 6s and 2 by 4s that wrap around the building to allow metal siding to be attached. After this delivery, the guys showed up and they did not waste any time whatsoever getting these holes dug. Their Bobcat had an amazing hole digger on it, and it dug through this awful soil in no time. And I'm telling you, the soil around my area in Southwest Missouri is just full of rocks. You put a shovel in the ground, you're guaranteed to hit a rock. After they got the holes dug, the next day they came out and they started setting the poles. This was a process that happened so fast that I did not expect them to be at this stage already. I figured it would be a few days of digging the holes, and then maybe the poles would go up within a week. But no, they got the poles up and then started wrapping the poles with the lumber. This really started to make the project come together. I could really see the vision that we lined out with the builder on what this thing was going to actually look like. Now, I will be honest with you, whenever I first saw it like this, I thought, it's not as big as what I thought it was going to be, but this should be more than enough room. Well, later in the video, you'll see I'm quite surprised by how big this building actually is. Now, I know 30 by 30 isn't a gigantic building, but in comparison to a small shed, which I've had in the past, this is almost the size of my 3-car garage. It's actually deeper than my 3-car garage, so the total amount of square feet winds up being bigger than my main garage on my house. Then you have the included lean-to on the side for things like my truck, which will add a lot of space in my main garage because I no longer will be parking in there. The next day, they came out and they had the trusses delivered, which this was a really cool process. Seeing them actually hang them up, they used the Bobcat with a special attachment to raise them up and then anchor them in place. And then they put boards across the top to keep them all nice and straight and structured. And now there's a place for the roof to actually be attached. The lean-to got a couple of boards, but that's for the next day for them to finish up the actual boards going across the lean-to. Having just the truss on there really did give it a feeling of a building. I know that sounds kind of odd, but whenever you walked in, it really did feel like this was starting to become more of a structure and not just wood poles in the ground. And the next day, I got surprised by a delivery. They delivered the windows, the garage doors, some metal that goes around the garage doors, and some of the wainscoting. The wainscoting is going to go along the bottom of the building, and this is just going to give it kind of a two-tone look. They wound up getting the walk-through door done, the garage wrap around the outer part of the garage done. As you can see, the stuff that they're putting behind it, that's what the builder called double bubble. It's a form of insulation, not necessarily to keep it hot or cold, but mainly to protect it from moisture, because this being a metal building, it basically will heat up like a tin can, and you would essentially have rain inside the building once it fully heats up. But this little insulation that looks like bubble wrap with silver on the outside and it's white on the inside prevents that from happening and adds just a little bit of kind of thermal protection around the whole entire building. I love this wainscoting that we put on here. This is a dark gray, and as you'll see here in a little bit, we went with a lighter gray on the upper portion and then white accents. This went really well with our main house, and both my wife and I agree that at the end of this build, we really made this thing match our house so well that it looks like this was built along the same timeline as our house. Now, one of the cool things about the metal building is once they start putting up the metal sides, it really goes fast because these strips come in almost full length that went all the way to the top of the roof down to the wainscoting. So one sheet takes up several feet. So it was no time before they had the building wrapped in the double bubble and then the outer layer of the metal. And you could really see what this was going to look like whenever it was all together. And I love this two-tone look. I don't know about you guys, but we originally weren't going to go with the wainscoting, but we decided to at kind of a last-minute thing. And I am really happy that we did. On a very windy day, these guys came out and got the roof done. They said that they had a ton of projects to do and they couldn't take a chance on bad weather or even windier conditions. But the wind gusts were over 20 miles an hour when they put this roof on. Now, this is the same gray color that is on our building, but whenever you see it in direct sunlight, it kind of has a silver look to it. But whenever the sun isn't directly hitting it, it's much darker looking than the gray that's actually on the building, even though it's the same color. It's pretty amazing how whenever you have a piece of metal at a different angle, it really does bring out different tones of that particular shade of whatever color you put on there. The next thing that they have to do is basically finish up the front of this. But in the meantime, I really got the feel of what this barn was going to feel like with the roof on and the sides on. And I was super surprised whenever they had their little Bobcat in there, how much room was left, even with the Bobcat in there. And that Bobcat is so much bigger than my mower. And I knew that once I saw that Bobcat sitting in there, I was like, this is gonna be absolutely perfect. It's gonna be exactly what I've been looking for in a building. Now, I do bike reviews on my other 2 YouTube channels that I've got, and those bikes come in every so often and I have to have a place to store them. So this is why I'm calling this barn the bike barn, because half of this barn is going to be used to store bikes while I'm reviewing them. And it's going to really free up space in my garage where my studio actually is. So this is going to allow to deliver a lot better quality content because I'm not having to do as much to get my studio ready. My studio is always going to be ready as I'm going to have storage for the bikes here. At this point, the building is pretty much all done. There's just a little small piece of metal on that front kind of eyebrow roof thing above the garage doors that they had to come back and actually install. But as you can see, they've got the boards up here ready for the concrete pour. And man, I'm super excited about the concrete on this because this was kind of a decision that my wife and I had to make. Is it worth the money to get the concrete? And boy, am I glad that we did get the concrete. Now, whenever you see them pour this concrete here in a minute, you will notice that there is no rebar in this concrete. That's a pretty common thing after doing quite a bit of research and talking with the concrete person. The concrete that they use is a fiber reinforced concrete, and that concrete is actually able to hold the weight of a standard vehicle with no problems whatsoever. So whenever you see them pour this without the rebar, don't be concerned about this, because this is a modern thing with fibers that are actually inside that crisscross each other, that are poured within the concrete themselves, giving the concrete a much stronger structure. These guys came out before the sun came up, and they worked all day on this barn. It was pretty cool. They got it poured within, I would say, 2, maybe 3 hours. They poured the inside and the lean-to side, and 2 guys stuck behind, and they wound up smoothing it out and then also running this really cool looking machine over it. I don't understand how the whole thing worked, but this is a process that they understood that I wasn't really clear on. So here's a look at this machine. It's kind of like a fan on a stick, and they ran it over this. If anybody knows what that process actually does, let me know, because it looks like it just kind of smoothed it and roughed it. And then another guy came in once it got dried far enough, and he wound up cutting all of the relief cuts. I was pleased to see that every 10 feet they did put a relief cut that ran the span of the barn both directions. And as far as the lean-to, you can see we went out 3 inches beyond the poles. People were kind of concerned about that whenever I requested that to be done, saying that that concrete's going to break. However, the concrete guy added a few pieces of rebar there to stiffen up the structure, and also added a couple of relief cuts. So if there are any cracks, hopefully it will go in those relief cuts and not crack off away from the barn. But look at this, absolutely amazing. One thing that surprised me is the moisture from the concrete took a lot longer, well over a week and a half, to fully kind of cure or dry in the barn, where the lean-to dried pretty quick because it had sun hitting it. It dried within a couple of days. But being in the shade in this barn in cooler weather, that inside took a while. As you can see, we got the garage doors installed. We went with a flat white garage door, and they put LiftMaster MyQ's garage door openers on here. These match similar to the garage door openers that are on my house, which is nice because I can use the MyQ setup. But these are insulated, so it will add or help with the colder or warmer weather, which is always a good thing. I'm a big believer in that. I was too excited. I had to add a bike in here. It's the bike barn after all. There was only one at the time, but we had a few more things before this thing could be settled. Here is a final look at what this actually looks like. We wound up staining the poles. We wound up adding some corbels above where the little lip is over the garage door. I think they look really good. They match the corbels that are on our house. Those are the little wooden things sticking down below that roof. And then we had the same guy who did our garage doors at our house come back and add wood accents that match our house. And then we had the garage door company come back out, weigh these garage doors, and add the appropriate springs to make sure that they can be opened really easily. This turned out so much better than both myself and my wife thought that it would ever turn out. This looks like a dream. We couldn't have asked for a better result. I wound up putting on one of those really cool digital locks, so I can go out there and just punch in a number. I don't have to worry about a key. We also had some shutters made, and we got those stained also, just to add little accents to make it look really finished. And I think that sets this barn apart from some of the ones that I've seen. What you can see here is basically the trench that was trenched to run the electrical to it. And that was another decision that we had to make, was do we want electrical? And boy, am I glad we did that. Big difference. The electrician was awesome. For only $50 more, he added this hookup for an air conditioner. So if I do want to add a mini split unit, it's ready to go. I added this smart light switch that works with Alexa, and then I added some LED lights. Now it's super bright in there at night. I can see everything I want. The lights shut off at a certain time, so I don't have to worry about them staying on overnight. This turned out absolutely awesome. It's a complete and utter mess right now because I'm transitioning all of my stuff from my garage into the barn that I want. And here is a good look at the electrical panel. You definitely get a lot of open spaces because I had him only put so many outlets on, but he was really cool when he installed this. He put every outlet has its own GFI and own breaker. So I don't have to worry about overloading the outlets because he put too many on one breaker. Each one has its own breaker. But this is the bike barn. What an absolute awesome building. It took way long, like well over 9 months to get this whole project done, but I am so happy with it and it was well worth it in the end. And I would totally do it again. We used Rob's custom buildings in Rogersville, Missouri to actually build the building. He did a really good job. He doesn't do many buildings that are this detailed and this custom, but I think he did a wonderful job. This is my bike barn. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.